The wind rolled low across the prairie, bending the tall grass like a whispered warning. Elias Mercer rode through it alone. Once, he'd had a ranch tucked along a bend of the Brazos River in North Texas. Once, he'd had a wife who sang while she worked and a son who laughed at thunder. Once, he'd been a man who believed the world could be carved into something gentle, with enough sweat and patience. That was before the raid. It happened at dawn, when the sky was still gray and forgiving. Elias had been out mending a fence line when he saw smoke rising in a thick black column. By the time he reached the house, it was already swallowed in flame. Horses screamed in the corral. Gunshots cracked like splitting timber. He saw riders' painted faces, braids flying, ponies swift as deer. He fired his rifle until the barrel burned his palm. He doesn't remember falling. He only remembers crawling through ash, calling for his wife, for his boy, and finding nothing but silence and blood-dark earth. Some said it was a band of Comanche warriors pushing settlers off their hunting grounds. Others said it was a splinter group acting alone. Elias didn't care about which story was true. Grief does not trouble itself with politics. He buried what he could find with his own hands. Then he burned what was left. After that, Elias Mercer stopped being a rancher. He rode north, trading his plow for a revolver, his grief for a reputation. He started with horse thieves along the Red River, then a corrupt land agent who'd been skimming claims from widows, then a railroad man who'd hired guns to clear farmers off disputed tracks. Each time, Elias told himself he was sharpening the blade, he would one day turn on the men who destroyed his life. They began calling him Black Mercer for the duster he wore and the smoke that seemed to follow him. Posters with his name drifted through towns from Abilene to Fort Worth. $300 Australian bounty, dead or alive. He did not hide from it. One evening, as the sun bled out behind the plains, Elias stopped in a frontier town, pressed hard against the wildlands. The saloon doors creaked as he stepped inside. Conversations dropped into uneasy quiet. At the far table sat a trapper, with half an ear and a scar like a lightning bolt down his cheek. He watched Elias the way a coyote watches a carcass calculating. "You looking for someone?" the trapper asked. "I'm looking for the Hawk Moon Band," Elias said. His voice was flat as winter. The trapper's jaw tightened. "You don't want them." Elias rested his hand near his revolver. That wasn't a question. The trapper sighed and leaned back. "They move along the Canadian River. 30 riders, maybe more. Good fighters. Got a chief named Crow." "Ruthless," Elias repeated softly. The word tasted like iron. He left before dawn the next morning, riding toward the river country, where scrub oak and canyon cut the land into hard shadows. For 3 days, he followed sign hoofprints, half swallowed by wind, a broken arrow shaft, ashes from a recent fire. On the 4th night, he found them. Their camp sat in a shallow valley, fires burning low, horses tethered along the ridge. He watched from above, rifle resting across his knees. He could see silhouettes moving between lodges. He imagined his wife among them, bound and afraid. He imagined his son calling for him, his finger tightened on the trigger. A hand touched his shoulder. Elias spun, revolver flashing up. A young boy stood there, maybe 12 years old. Dark hair, wide eyes, no war paint, no weapon. "Don't shoot," the boy whispered in halting English. Elias froze. "What are you doing here?" The boy swallowed. "My sister, she saw you watching. She says you come to kill us." Elias said nothing. "You think we kill your family?" the boy continued. "But Tall Crow did not raid your ranch. That was Gray Wolf's band. They broke from us last winter. They take what they want. Tall Crow forbade it." The word struck Elias like a sudden gust. He had built his revenge on a single assumption. He had fed it, nurtured it, let it guide his hand in blood. "You lie," Elias said, though the certainty in his voice had begun to crack. The boy shook his head. "Tall Crow wants peace. He trades horses in the South. He says war brings soldiers. Soldiers bring death for all." Below them, a figure emerged from one of the lodge's older men, tall and straight-backed despite his years. He looked up toward the ridge, as if he could sense the weight of Elias's stare. "That's him," the boy said softly. Elias looked through the sights of his rifle. One squeeze, one thunderclap. Revenge would be simple again. But he remembered the railroad man begging in the dust, the land agent swearing innocence. How easy it had been to believe guilt when it served his pain. "You could be leading me into a trap," Elias muttered. "If we wanted you dead," the boy replied, "you would be." Silence stretched between them, thin as wire. Below, Tall Crow spoke quietly to a woman, then knelt to stir the fire. The gesture was ordinary, human. Elias lowered the rifle. "Where is Gray Wolf?" he asked. The boy pointed west, toward the broken mesas near the borderlands. "He gathers men who like to fight." Elias nodded once. "Tell your chief. Tell him I was here." He rose and stepped back into the darkness, leaving the valley untouched. 3 days later, he found Gray Wolf's camp in a ravine choked with cedar. These men were different, louder, meaner, with stolen cattle penned near their lodges and rifles stacked in careless piles. Elias did not announce himself. The first shot dropped a sentry before he could cry out. Chaos followed shouting, horses bucking, gunfire splitting the narrow canyon. Elias moved like a man already dead, fearless and precise. He found Gray Wolf near the back of the ravine, rallying his fighters. The man's face bore streaks of ash and red paint. His eyes were cold and certain. They faced each other across 20 paces of dust. Gray Wolf fired first. The bullet grazed Elias's shoulder, spinning him half around. Elias answered with 2 shots. Gray Wolf fell. The fight bled out soon after. Some fled into the hills, others lay still in the dust. Elias stood amid the smoke, chest heaving. The man who had ordered the raid, the man truly responsible, was dead at his feet. But the emptiness inside Elias did not lift. He rode back toward the Brazos weeks later. The ranch was still a blackened scar. Grass had begun to grow where the house once stood. He dismounted and walked to the place where he had buried his family. He knelt there until the sun dipped low. "I thought killing him would bring you back," he said to the wind, "or bring me peace." The prairie gave no answer. By nightfall, Elias made a choice. He would not rebuild the ranch. The land held too many ghosts. But neither would he return to being Black Mercer, outlaw with a price on his head and blood on his conscience. He rode south instead, toward towns where settlers and tribes met in uneasy trade. A man who knew both sides of violence could sometimes prevent it. Some called him a gunman, some called him a traitor, some called him a fool. But when smoke rose on the horizon, Elias Mercer rode toward it not for revenge this time, but to stop the fire before it swallowed another home. And though the prairie wind still carried sorrow, it no longer carried only hate.